Oh, hello there. Yes, well, please send me evenings and weekends, as the Gang of Four said. Yes. Still, they're not running China anymore, so there you go. Anyway, today I wanted to discuss a good friend to the channel, Lottie Moore. Not quite sure exactly who she's working for now. It's probably somebody in Tufton Street. But anyway, usually policy exchange and bending the ear of government ministers. But it was a report that I've only become aware of. It's been out for a couple of weeks. It's from the Family Education Trust. Yes, they've been going for 50 years. So they must be very respectable. Yes, except of course, Family and Education Trust are run by concerned citizens that don't like gay people. So gives you a bit of a hint as to what's going on there. Anyway, boys and the burden of labels, an examination of masculinity teaching in schools. And of course, being a teacher, I piqued my interest. I do like the word piqued. So it's worthwhile diving into the report. It contains an awful lot of verbiage about nothing at all. But it's worthwhile just looking at the methodology of this. I know, I do like to, don't I? So anyway, some questions were asked. All right, okay, there are a lot of shock, horror findings, said nobody ever. But moving on from that, yeah, to what extent are schools teaching the concept of toxic masculinity? Now, before we dive into the shock, horror findings, as I always say here, there is a major problem with the concept of teaching a concept, all right? It sounds to the layperson like you're trying to persuade somebody that something is true. Now, yesterday afternoon, I was teaching GCSE sociology, and I was teaching Marxism and feminism, and from things from a new right perspective as well, which is, if you don't know what that is, it's basically your kind of Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, and pretty much anybody on Talk TV or GB News over here. It's that perspective, you know. Gay people are just about acceptable, but trans certainly aren't, and the family is very precious, and brown people run away from their families, which is why they're poor. It's all that stuff, okay? Now, I was teaching all three of those things as a concept because it's part of the syllabus, but I wasn't teaching the young person I was with to believe any of those things. So we run into a bit of problem with language with this particular investigation. So 3 in 10 schools survey say they are teaching pupils about the concept of toxic masculinity. Now, as a teacher, and you know, a bit of a painful sort of pedantic git of a one, granted, I don't really know what that means because, yes, I mean, you know, if I was teaching in a group of students about what I was yesterday, which was the notion of family and the rise of feminism and the effect that that has had on the family, then undoubtedly something like maybe toxic masculinity would come up in a conversation. So I would be talking about the concept, but I wouldn't be persuading anybody anything about it whatsoever. So it is not really surprising here that schools are going, no, we don't really do that. But yeah, you can't really get particularly upset about 54% of them not doing the thing that you want them to do, yeah? To what extent are schools, second one, teaching that men and boys possess traits that are inherently toxic and negative for society? Well, obviously, with a huge report like this with enormous implications, you'd expect it to be a huge number, but it's 5% of schools. I'm just not touching it at all, okay? Yeah? It's not the sort of thing you can teach, okay? It's not my job to teach pupils a particular perspective on anything like this, despite what Lottie Moore and various other people will come on to would like you to believe. It doesn't happen. I'll state it again. It doesn't happen. It's like critical race theory. Doesn't happen in schools. It doesn't happen. It's not taught. It doesn't happen, okay? Teaching that slavery was a bad thing isn't critical race theory. It's history. Yeah, I know. Rafe from the New Culture Forum. We'll come back to them. Yeah, I know they don't like that, but I'm sorry, but you really can't make anything of those figures whatsoever. And yet there's an entire report here about shock horror. We'll come on to the reactions. To what extent are schools teaching that young men as young men as a category are in any way problematic? Well, a whopping 84% of them aren't, right? Yeah. 4% of schools, okay? Oh no, 4%. No, sorry, laughable. And yet they managed to get this out. Why? culture wars, obviously that's the whole thing. And then they talk about third party providers and about informing parents. Well, parents don't need to be informed about a PHSE lesson where various pupils might talk about things. There's no requirement to do that whatsoever, and you'd be very surprised if every single PHSE lesson had to be flagged up to any parents beforehand. I know a lot of people who are certainly Christians that don't like gay people but are keen on the family, and maybe, I don't know, set up an organisation 50 years ago, do want that to happen. But life isn't like that. And in terms of the third-party providers, what they basically mean by that is she was digging, Lottie, bless her, we'll come on to her, was digging for information and just didn't really get any. Anyway, of course, this stuff gets presented to the press, who don't bother looking at it whatsoever. So you get this in the Daily Mail. Teachers tell schoolboys that displaying traditional gendered roles in a family could lead them to committing rape. Yeah, yes, I did manage to find that in the text, but you have to hunt for it. Almost a third of schools use relationship and sex education classes to tell kids about toxic masculinity. Yeah. Almost all schools will tell kids about the Holocaust, but they don't want them to dress up in black uniforms and go village to village rounding people up. Can you see that the two... No, you can't, can you, Daily Mail? No, you can't. That's the whole point, you see. Isn't it beautiful? Yes. Anyway, Lottie has turned up in a variety of places. Astoundingly, for somebody that calls herself a feminist. I know. I don't know where she gets that from. But anyway, she cropped up very recently on discussing the report, and how shock horror it was, with a great friend of the channel, Connor Tomlinson, on another great friend of the channel, the New Culture Forum. Notice the new studio, lots of lovely money there. Where that came from. Anyway, Lottie presumably had to come downstairs or go upstairs to the studio or something like that, because it's Tufton Street. And there she is. But of course, the the host and Connor, of course, will be, getting a little bit upset about this notion about teaching toxic masculinity, because there's nothing toxic about Connor Tomlinson, nothing toxic about him. It just doesn't really like women having, the freedom to decide their own fertility. I can't see a problem with that, and I'm surprised that Lottie can't. But there you go, it's Tufton Street, right? We're all boys together. Now, Lottie is in many ways an intriguing character and represents, I think, an awful lot of what women in her position are kind of stuck with. Come on to that as a notion. I mean, she's been heavily involved in the whole anti-trans thing in and around Kemi Badenoch. So all of this stuff is just nasty culture war stuff, right? Yeah, but this really caught my eye in the Daily Telegraph a couple of days ago. All right, I'm 28 and earn more than £60,000, but I still can't afford to have children, says Lottie Moore. Yeah, it's her again. Like me, almost every young woman I know feels that motherhood is out of reach. If we're going to break the cycle, we need change. Yes. Now, presumably she has a partner, and I presume her partner earns about the same as she does. So their collective income is about £100,000 a year, which is about three times minimum wage. Not minimum wage, 3 times average wage, roughly speaking. And she's bemoaning the fact that she's, oh dear, posh gal who went to Cambridge is, oh no, dreadfully unable to have children, which of course is farcical. I know loads of people that collectively in the household earn less than £35,000 or so a year who struggle to bring up children. So I'm not very sympathetic to the alleged feminist that is Lottie. But think about the wider implications of this, okay? She is complaining about very much the social policies that she, in terms of the work that she's done for Policy Exchange at Tufton Street, have been advocating for quite vociferously for years. Yeah, this is the economy we live in. They wanted to do this, all right? They wanted that Liz Truss budget. They wanted austerity. They want all of these things. And right now, in terms of getting American evangelical money, they are quite will happily invest a lot of time and money in wanting teachers not to discuss anything about such things as masculinity or whatever it might be. Yeah, she is the reason for she is, at least in part, the reason why she is in the position that she is. And I am astounded that anybody can call themselves a feminist and not have that level of self-awareness. Still, I suppose it doesn't matter because it pays, eh? And in the meantime, I have to field lots of stupid questions from people who don't really understand what goes in schools, like Lottie. But I am sorry, you're going to produce a report that's getting very, very cross at something that 4% of schools in a very ambiguous question may or may not be doing. You can just go away whilst I laugh at you. Anyway, do have a lovely Saturday. Oh, the last gasp of the sunshine we'll have for a while. Yes. Anyway, I wish Lottie all the best in scrimping and saving for that first baby. Yeah, I guess nannies are getting just more and more and more expensive, aren't they? Bless.